Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is that you're tuning in, thank you for stopping by. This is the Martal Group Fireside Chats, where each week we sit down with an industry expert and get their unique perspective on the world through the lens that we all know as sales and marketing. Today we sit down with Mitch Knauf from Clio. Now, Mitch is the Director of Strategy and Operations and leads his team to be involved with just about everything that flows through that organization. Have a listen.
What I've learned the most about being successful at like a strategy and operations role, and I'll take your question in that direction.
Yeah.
I think is just being extremely curious and leaning in and always kind of, my motto has always been like, never say no and like always embrace discomfort. Like all these things that you're going to be jumping into, you can imagine like the ambiguity is so fierce and you just got to kind of like go step by step, build out a plan and start executing it and kind of have an impetus for action. So I think being action oriented and curious will get you really far in this area, and you're always going to be able to kind of brush up on your skills and the ways in which you can kind of tackle the work, but you got to make sure that you are excited about it, that it gives you and brings some levity to the day to day. I mean, our team is in so much work and we're always driving so many initiatives and it can get exhausting, but like making sure people are having fun along the way is so important to making sure you have strong relationships and people enjoy working with you. And I can't stress that enough in terms of making sure you build strong relationships through that method.
Now, being able to work within one department is an important piece of any company's puzzle, but being able to work with every department, that's a whole nother story. Mitch tells us a little bit more. So without further ado, let's hop right on in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fireside Chats with the Martal Group. So happy to have you tuning in, whatever platform you happen to be tuning in on. I have a special guest here today that I'm pretty excited about. We got a chance to catch up a little bit before we started this recording, get a chance to know each other, to dive into a couple different things. And I'm personally excited to talk to this fine gentleman that is sitting here with me. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Mitch Knauf. He is the Director of Strategy and Operations over at Clio, fun, legal-based technology company. I think you guys are going to be really interested in learning about, especially with how technology is starting to emerge into a lot of different spaces. So without further ado, Mitch, welcome to the podcast, sir. It's good to have you here.
Likewise, it's good to be here. And Chris, I appreciate you inviting me on. I'm honored to partake and to share whatever I can on some of the things going on at Clio and my personal experience.
Heck yeah, I love it. I love it. So, the podcast, for all the listeners that are out there, everyone who's kind of listened before, a lot of this is around sales and marketing and, some different aspects in there. We've interviewed and had other guests on the podcast that, the last guest that we had is, or one of the last guests, that we had was around a lot of like mental wellness and mental health. Had a number of different people on here. Your side, from what I can tell, and what we've talked about, is more on strategy. It's on ops. It's on, how are we conceptualizing a lot of different things. So why don't we back up just a tad bit and set the stage, Mitch, if you don't mind just diving into a little bit of who you are, what you do, what your background is, or, what you do specifically at Clio. I think that'll help just kind of lay a good ground layer before we really start diving into some more meatier questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm excited to kind of bring a different perspective than maybe some of your the prior people you brought onto the podcast.
Yeah.
I won't go back to all my experience, but at least just kind of like talking a little bit about what I kind of do at Clio and some of the key responsibilities we have. So in strategy and operations, it's always a unique field in the sense that like I think every company does it differently. Mm-hmm. At Clio, the scope of what this team really owns focuses on one, assessing and quantifying net new opportunities or kind of looking out further. So when we think about like the 3 to 5 year time frame, like what are the new things that we need to be starting to explore and how do we work cross-functionally to bring that research to light and inform where we want to invest? On an annual basis, we really try to help refresh and set like evergreen strategy around what's the company doing at its like the top level, but also what are the different business segments focused on? And how do we allocate resources to ensure that we're putting ourselves in the position to kind of realize whatever financial goals that we have, or financial or non-financial or otherwise. And then our team also owns like the OKR program, so goal setting. How do we make sure that those are both aligned, tops down, bottoms up, and sideways? And then we run through business reviews. So we kind of basically have an infrastructure or kind of ritual put in place where we bring the leadership team together. We assess the performance of the business and kind of help basically course correct or drive prioritization on the tactics to ensure that we're kind of meeting our goals on that annual basis. So that's kind of what my team owns. That's the experience that I kind of have is like, how do we really build a team that's doing that well and supporting the executive team in managing the business overall.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there's a lot of like, there's a lot of, I mean, not to use the word that's literally in your job title, right, which is strategy, but like there's a big strategy that you and your team kind of own to figure out the next move. Basically, I think that's probably like the best way that I conceptualize that, or I can kind of dumb that down, right? Is just to say, okay, we're going to figure out the next move in whatever it needs to be, whether it's, finding the next product for the market fit, whether it's finding the next move that we need to course correct for something that maybe didn't go as planned. Just trying to figure out all those ins and outs of where we're going to move next. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like ultimately kind of setting course on the how, like what, the goal, the executive team is going to say, this is the goals, this is what we want to achieve, working with the board of directors, etc. But we kind of work, of course, we're generalists. There's, subject matter experts throughout the business that own their own strategies, but we help ensure that there's a certain level of rigor and quality to each and that they're fitting together. So we kind of bring the connective tissue across the organization on strategy.
Gotcha. So would you say then, just talking about your team and diving a little bit more into your role, because I think when we talked last week, right, we got a chance to dive into that a little bit. It's not only, coming up with the conceptual ideas of where things need to go or what you want to create next or whatever it is. You guys are a part of every single process that takes place internally, right? So it's not like you're just coming up with an idea and handing it off to somebody and saying, hey, good luck, hope you win, right? You guys are kind of like working hand in hand to make sure, okay, here's the idea, here's where the reality is, how do we get there, how does it move, so you guys are kind of ingrained with every part of that process from start to finish, right?
Yeah, no, we're spread thin throughout the organization. We're a centralized team that kind of like is mapped to each business segment. And to your point, like, yeah, we really are. I mean, our goal is to get, or we are for the most part, really in the operating rhythm of both the go-to-market teams, marketing, sales, customer success, as well as the product organization, and understanding kind of like what's on the forefront of their development. And we're making sure that there's continuity between all of that. Mm-hmm. A lot of where I would say S&O plays a really strong role in leading is more on like where there's ambiguity and we don't yet have a defined set of processes and teams dedicated. So we start bring like a framework of saying, how do we evaluate, what's aligned to our mission and vision that we want to get into next? Where do we have a right to win? Where are there market sizes or growth opportunities that we see being really attractive, and bringing that research together, whether it's bringing kind of like our market research team, UXR, product team to kind of say, where are we going to differentiate in the space? Are we going to be number one or are we not? And that helps kind of inform where we want to go next. And once we take it from 0 to 1 or 1 to 10, that's when it would start to kind of get more embedded in the business. It's just another product or area that our teams on like the go-to-market side of the house are bringing to our customers, whether that's prospects or cross-selling with our customer success teams. We really kind of bring that earlier framework into light and kind of like essentially inform kind of like the broader roadmap.
I always envision roles like this type of conversation and like talking to somebody who has a role like you. It always gets me excited personally because I always like the process of trying to build something almost from scratch, right? You guys aren't necessarily doing that, but it's taking an idea from the very, very just like beginning stages of it and then watching it kind of come to life and breathing through it. Like I always attribute it to like playing with Legos. I'm a nerd. I love Legos, but I attribute it to playing with Legos, right? Because you're just starting with a blank slate and you're like, okay, I need to go from here to here, which is your 0 to 1 that you just mentioned. And now I want to go from 1 to 10 to complete this project. Okay. Where do I need to go? So Mitch, tell me about, you already kind of described like the life cycle of what that is, right? Kind of how you're spread thin throughout the organization, you're working with all the individual teams. What's a typical life cycle on, let's say like a fresh idea on something you want to go to market with? Is it, is there any sort of specific timeline or average timeline behind that, or what's that process look like?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to give a perspective here, and it's constantly evolving. Like we're trying to condense this process and get better at it and make it even more seamless. But at a high level, I would say we try to do, the ritual that we've kind of embedded within Clio on this front is H1 is really dedicated, and that's like the first half of the year, is dedicated to doing a lot of this underlying research on like net new expansion areas. Mm-hmm. And so where can we go deep, really talk to experts in the area, new customer segments, like whatever that might look like, to get a much deeper picture of what does this opportunity look like? Flesh it out, put some
Hmm.
financials behind it. What would the ROI look like? What would it look like to go to market? How well is it synergistic with our business? What is all the product lift that we need to get into? Do we need to consider vendor relationships or any partnership? So we're kind of exploring all those things in H1, and H2 is really about kind of saying, okay, we've done enough of that work. Now we have all of the existing business segments and products that we want to invest in and these net new ones. So we're always thinking about multiple horizons of investment and also thinking about how do we kind of allocate resources and investment across, let's say, like kind of I would say tech debt type work,
Hmm.
existing product type work, and net new big bets. And so when we're thinking about that big bet category, that's where that research comes into play. And we get really
Yeah.
confident about where is it that we want to go. And we don't want to spread ourselves too thin on, hey, we want to place 5 bets. We probably want to place just 1 or 2 each year. And we already know that we kind of stage our investment in a way that's going to be allow us to be nimble and flexible in the sense of saying, okay, we think we have all these assumptions. We're going to invest here, and we're going to see
Hmm.
where that plays out, going 0 to 1. But once we hit that stage or that gate, we may decide not to invest further. And so that's where you might say, hey, we're going to put this on the shelf, or we're going to kill it for now. We're not going to go invest 1 to 10, or we decide to go do so, and we kind of again put more juice behind that particular opportunity to ensure we're kind of seizing what we see as being the next big business for Clio.
We kind of dove into your role. I want to take a little bit of a step back and talk more about Clio for just a hot second. That way, the
Yeah.
audience kind of understands. Talk to me about what Clio does. Cloud-based legal technology is kind of like the highest or probably the most basic way that you could probably describe it. But dive into that a little bit more and talk about what Clio does specifically.
Yeah, I mean, from a high level, Clio's a vertical SaaS company focused on law firms. The original hypothesis of our founder and current CEO, Jack Newton, was, hey, we have a long tail of lawyers. Like if you look at the makeup in the North America in particular, very fragmented, long tail of folks that are like solo practitioners up to small, medium-sized businesses.
Right.
We think that they could be, well served by a really strong product that was behind the cloud-based application kind of like wave that was happening in 2008, 2009 timeframe. And so that's really what the undercurrent of this business was, is that we wanted to bring software to the masses essentially. And we saw such a great uptick in terms of like basically getting product market fit, scaling to be the number one cloud-based LPM being legal practice management software
Hmm.
in North America, and then continue to expand from there. Our vision is to become like the operating system for not just law firms, but the legal industry, like basically thinking about
Yeah.
all the personas, whether it's courts or in-house counsel or whatever else. We want to start to like permeate the area, and like we see a lot of benefit in making those connections through software. And we know that our customers see the same value, and so we're excited about continuing that journey. But yeah, and if you want to get the specifics of kind of like where our sweet spots are, like we have that operating system really is like a CRM. We have something called Clio Manage or Clio Grow, which helps
Hmm.
grow your business. Clio Manage, which is that legal practice management software. We have a payment solution that helps you process your payments. And
Hmm.
then we also have a document automation tool that helps you kind of like create your documents and manage them in a Clio Drive. So we have like a full suite of products that's continuing to grow. But that's Clio in a nutshell, I guess, in terms of kind of like the genesis and where we are today.
I love that, and I've got kind of two questions that spawn from everything that you just told me about Clio, and one, honestly, I could go in either direction, so I'm just going to pick one, flip a coin, right? So you talked about how Clio, a lot of it's like cloud based, in everything that you do, trying to become like the operating system. I think is what you said, right? Trying to become the operating system within the legal sector, the legal system that we have here. Is AI on the current roadmap? Is that a current portion of what Clio does, or is it something you're more looking forward to, trying to figure out what that next best fit is, or like you said earlier, do you have the right to win with AI? How does AI play a factor into all of this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think short answer is we actually announced in our AI product just last year at this big event that we hold called ClioCon.
Okay.
The product that we're calling Clio Duo, and it'll be kind of an assistant or co-pilot kind of sort of interface within our product that allows you to kind of learn the product better, get to your questions more seamlessly, where you can ask with native language like, hey, what cases are open? What's my next task I need to do?
Yeah.
And we see that evolving really into actually doing tasks for you, like where it'll kind of say, hey, I recommend, all these things, and you're just kind of approving them, or you're automating that based on your own preferences. But in general, obviously, you can tell we're like very much thinking about this. And I think we talked also, and I'll just dovetail this into kind of how we think about our business and what we're really excited about. Like
Hmm.
we are being the number one LPM, globally.
Yeah.
We're really focused on looking forward and not backward, about like trying to catch up or think about competition. Like we're in a privileged position to kind of innovate in the space, and we see that as being like a clear opportunity. Is like, how do we basically reassess all the different problem areas that we've kind of looked to solve historically, and think through the lens of AI, like where can that really be a step function change in the value we can provide our customers. And I think
Hmm.
Clio Duo is just the start of that. Like we kind of evaluate it looking at where are lawyers spending the most of their time. Like you can think of like two things. Like one, you have the billable hours that they're trying to, right, obviously maximize with their clients, and they want to be utilized, and they have administrative time. And where are they spending all that administrative time is kind of like where we're trying to shrink the
Yeah.
most, because we want to make sure that they are, lawyers feel like they're practicing law. They're not managing their business with all the administrative tasks. So the more that we can apply AI to basically all those key tasks that they're doing, they're spending 80% of their time on, that's going to be where the big opportunity is for AI.
Yeah, and honestly, you kind of touched on the second question that I had, which was like, how are you guys trying to really just try to maintain, like a leadership position, or trying to maintain like this stakehold that you have within the sector to say, we're kind of like the world's leading platform. We're at the top of the list, or up towards the top of the list on, when you look up solutions that you guys offer, like we're up there on Google search, or whatever somebody happens to use. So, being able to look forward in how you innovate, and how you look to the next step, I think it kind of helps circle this back to everything that we've already discussed so far on what you and your team does, right? You guys are the ones who are trying to figure out what's the next step, how are we looking forward, and all that sort of stuff. Based on that, though, how is your team, or how are you leading your team? What is your team looking for to always be on top of that? Right. So, you guys already know that, you're trying to look forward and look for the next thing, but how are you training your teams to stay on top of that? Like, are you walking them through certain exercises? Are you telling them, hey, look at these, read these sites, or read these articles, or what, how does that look for you guys as you try to like develop the individuals on your team?
It is a great question. I think on my team specifically, we're a small but mighty team. The way in which I've kind of helped provide more, I guess, clarity on these expectations, are kind of like, hey, we want our team members to be kind of aligned to very specific segments of the business, and all the core activities that I rattled through at the very beginning, like they own that through and through for that entire business unit. So they develop really strong relationships with the leaders, and they become a thought partner. They bring in external, like market information to these leaders to help inform not only like what is the big things around the corner, but also how does it inform like their tactical day to day. I mean, we talk about like sales and marketing strategy, like that's you're constantly evolving and tweaking that,
Right. Yeah.
quarter to quarter and everything. And so it's important to have your finger on that pulse. Some leaders are better than others, right? Like they have that natural innate like desire, or like they're already plugged into their particular business. Others have like, they're a leader over multiple, and they can only do so much. So we kind of play to the strengths and weaknesses of where everyone's, best suited.
Hmm.
And we kind of fill the gaps where we feel like we're driving the most value on that front. So that's kind of like how I think about, I guess, like some of the work that our team does on that front. I don't know if that answers your question specifically, but is there anything else there that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think a lot of that touches pretty well just on like how, because I've talked about this concept with a couple other guests, and basically the question is, how are you keeping your axe sharpened, basically, right? Because in a world where, just in sales and marketing, if we're just going to look at that scope, right, that is always evolving, always changing. I mean, I'm reading on like new techniques, or new things that are proving to be effective, right, when prospecting, or when going out and doing inbound versus outbound, the whole nine yards, right? You
Right.
step into a role like yours, which is somewhat related to sales and marketing, but also has a lot more to do throughout all departments within within your organization, right? You guys are constantly having to just be on the lookout for trends or things that are changing. So I'm always interested to see how, the individuals are, like what's the best practices for helping your team to grow, to make sure that you guys are always staying on top of that. I think that's so important, whether it's continuing education or just saying, hey, I want you to focus on this segment for a week and tell me what you find or what new articles are coming out. I mean, there's so much that probably changes in both of our worlds that we're always trying to stay on top of, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think we definitely have, I would say I've spent some time trying to work with my team to kind of like come up with what are the key sources of like really good legal
Yeah.
technology news that you can kind of like stay plugged into and understand. And we share that with our corporate development team who's looking at, mergers and acquisition opportunities. And we're all kind of like trying to make sure that we're staying abreast of this information and then sharing it across teams, very like just open. When you see an opportunity or there's no harm in kind of sharing something and getting a point of view. And so I encourage that with my team. And I like to try to like, lead by example too, where other departments are sharing that information and it's sparking ideas and new ways in which we're working together or on with our customers, for instance. The other thing too that I spent a lot of time on when I first joined Clio was setting like more clear frameworks and
Okay.
exercises around how we go about this, because I think it's one thing to kind of say, hey, here's some sources, like stay plugged in, like do your thing.
Right.
It's another to say, hey, we're leading projects with this sort of framework. We're going to be working on, ABC, but for XYZ that we're not involved in, like this is the same level of rigor and level of depth that we expect when it comes to like having external information inform kind of how we do things
Mm-hmm.
internally. And there's a breadth of information that can kind of inform that, but that's like high level one thing that I think is really important, particularly as you're trying to build a muscle on this. Like you got to be really intentional and you got to kind of do it bite size and then grow it from there for it to kind of like kind of take seed within the organization.
Yeah, and I'm sure that those kind of like a lot of that stuff snowballs is what I found, right? You kind of start small, or you start with, I think you just said like bite-sized pieces, right? And you kind of, that will start to kind of grow and take hold on some of your day-to-day stuff to where it becomes second nature to either like check certain things or to think about, always ask X, Y, and Z questions about whatever task you're about to do and stuff like that. And that applies to whether I find at least that if it applies to whether it's a small project or kind of like a large, organization shifting type project, right? It's all kind of back and forth. Mitch, I'm interested in kind of like the legal sector in general. We talked a little bit about this previously. How is the legal sector with the adoption of technology, just kind of in general, right? You guys are coming in and working to kind of, I don't want to say replace, I hesitate to say replace, the systems that are currently within the legal sector or law firms or wherever, but, you guys are moving in with a pretty monumental piece of, or pretty monumental solution or set of solutions that you're offering. Is there a lot of resistance to applying this technology? Are you finding that there's people who are like, yeah, we'll take all the help we can get because it makes our lives that much easier? I mean, where is the sector at with that type of adoption?
Yeah, it's really transformed over the last decade, I'd say, on that front. I think like when we look back to where it was 10 years ago or so, you had a lot of resistance where I think like smaller firms, for instance, felt like they didn't need to invest in that technology or it was too pricey. It didn't make sense for
Mm-hmm.
them. There's also concerns about security. I mean, we're talking about lawyers who are working with privileged, sensitive information, and if that gets leaked or gets shared in an inappropriate way, they lose their bar certification. So like this
Yeah.
is their livelihood on the line. So they can't be messing around too much with it. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like different components that we've been, I would say, as a whole industry, not just like Clio, but like the LPM in general, trying to kind of bridge with all of the different legal providers and making sure that they feel comfortable with the technology. And I think that's what happened over the last decade was really turning the corner on law firms basically being a lot more comfortable with cloud-based technology, a lot more receptive to the idea that like they need to use technology to like again reduce their admin time and be more
Yeah.
utilized in their own role. And it's taken a long time. It's not like the cutting edge, like front, early adopters are probably a smaller segment than other industries.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can think about it, like as more lawyers start to retire and the new generations are coming in, they're using technology throughout their entire lives. So like
Right.
that segment of our customer base or prospects, they're naturally inclined to just like jump right in. They're solo right out of college, and they're like, hey, like, where's my first software? I need to like have something to manage my business. And so it's become a lot easier on that front. I think the other thing though that we think about, and I don't know if this is expanding too far from your question, but I thought it would be kind of interesting, so it was, at least came to mind for me,
Yeah.
was that technology's role, not with our customers, but with their clients. So like, how are their clients basically
Oh,
working with
yeah.
them, as being a really important thing. And we talked about this a little bit before, but it's crazy to think that I think it's 70 to 80% of legal services that like cases that exist, for instance, globally, are not actually being, a lawyer is not helping or solving that. And that's because access to justice is so challenging, whether that's due to geological or geographical footprint and like actually getting to a lawyer, or it's the cost of using a lawyer, or the complexity of the legal system. All these things create a lot of friction. And so like, when we think about the tip of the like iceberg here is like what we're currently servicing, and by our customers adopting technology, it allows for them, again, like they can change their costing models. It allows them to be more efficient. Hopefully, we're ideally chipping away at this whole access to justice problem, and technology can help with the geographical kind of consideration. We try to think of like a courtroom and like how do you get justice? Well, you have to like go someplace and you have to have a judge.
Right.
How do we rethink what that system looks like? And that's a long-term kind of rethinking about what the legal industry looks like. But we know technology plays a really strong role there, and it can help reduce the friction, create more opportunity for folks who need legal support to really get it, essentially.
And I think that's something that, I remember talking briefly about it before, but even just thinking about it now, it's probably not something that's on the forefront of everyone's mind who's outside of the legal sector, right? Because you just named off all the major components that I would have named off too, right? About how you get access to justice, or you could just get access to help in general, right? There's a funding challenge that's probably there. There's probably a geography challenge that's there. Just trying to understand who the right key players are, who to go to. I mean, literally just today, my neighborhood that I live in has a Facebook group, and there was somebody who had posted in there just trying to say, "Hey, I'm in need of legal services. Can anybody give me a suggestion, or can anybody help?" And those are all just like little pieces that it sounds like your team is thinking about day in and day out to figure out what's the next step, what's the next implementation for Clio to try and help anyone who's looking for it in an efficient way. Do you guys think, because this just popped into my head and this is kind of random, but do you guys also think not only the adoption rate of the technology in the legal sector, but you also mentioned like their clients? Do you think about how the clients have access to technology, if that question makes sense? Like, you and I are within an arm's reach of our phones and our computers in the legal system, or, the clients that you work with, they're getting set up with this system, but do their clients have the access to get to a computer or to get to a phone or to, all that? Is that a factor in how you're building these things?
Yo, definitely. I mean, we have a feature within our core managed product called the Clio for Clients, and it's essentially basically what we think about is like, what are all the options or preferences that clients may or may have, and like how they work with a lawyer.
Yeah.
So today, that's like our current focus is like when you're on a case, how does the intake? So like once you find a lawyer, like reaching out to them, how do we make it super easy for that lawyer to figure out if there's a good fit with you? Then once you're actually working with that lawyer, what is the communication style? Like we can use text message, email, like we have like I said, like an application for clients so they can all share data easily. It's all secure, and it works really seamlessly with the workflows of the lawyer so that they're not spending a ton of hours or time, like, basically finding other ways that they need to try to bill for all the extra administrative work that they're doing on behalf of their clients. And we're also enabling payment options, right? Like I said, Clio Payments is awesome because it allows you to be able to pay with credit card, ACH, or like a variety of other methods. And it's all seamlessly baked into the single product. So it's easy for the lawyer, it's easy for the client. And the more that we can solve those client customer friction points, like that we're adding a ton of value for both sides. That means that we're improving the value that Clio provides. And that's exactly like our goal, right? Like if we're going to sell a good product, we want to be attacking those value opportunities.
Now, without giving away too much, information or, privileged information or anything like that, I don't want you to kind of give away the farm or anything like that. But do you have any kind of like general problems that you and your team are facing right now specific to the industry that you're in that you're trying to solve for, or any like major challenges that you've, recently overcome that have kind of unlocked some new doors for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one that like in general, we're working on a lot of different ways in which I would say I'm trying to like think of like the best surface area to kind of explore here. Like one big challenge or thing that we're like thinking about next is that we see a lot of value in bringing like a one-stop shop solution to our customers. So we're constantly thinking about like how to expand the product that we build and the different like products that fit under the umbrella that is Clio. And so like that's one key area that we constantly are working on, and that kind of fits with probably a lot of the evaluation, investment ideation that I was talking about earlier. But like to take like one option, for instance, like with the combination of like where AI is and where we see a lot of lawyers spending a lot of their time, it's in kind of like drafting documents and
Mm.
generating documents. And so while we're an LPM and we have a lot of workflows, we have some document management storage type services. Like we're continuously iterating and trying to think about like what is the way in which AI and workflow management can kind of like we can create like a very unique value that not many other players can. And like we kind of like think about owning like the workflow. We have a right to kind of probably have the most data around how lawyers are working day to day, and we can really leverage that information to build a very unique experience. And so that's kind of like one area of opportunity or quote unquote challenge as you kind of were articulating that I'm really excited about that as we're continuing to explore and figure out like where Clio plays best.
I love that. And just being able to figure out what those challenges are is probably just like a small piece of the puzzle. And then you can kind of build the solutions from there. And, like you said before, like how your team is just so integrated with everyone else, that all kind of plays a role in moving things forward, right? Now, I know you're not specifically within the sales department or the marketing department or anything like that, but you interact with them probably on a pretty regular basis and everything like that. Can you speak at all to how the relationships and how the problem solving works post kind of like connecting with a client and post sale and everything like that? Is your team still involved with, the individual account management side of the house, or do you guys more stay away from some of that stuff to think more of on like the big picture?
Chris, we're never too far away from any team. We like to
Love that.
support everybody. No, so yeah, we definitely get into the nuanced details and really try to better understand and like think through some of the strategies here on post sale. I
Hmm.
would say some of the things that are unique to our industry is like even for small, medium-sized practices, we're kind of reaching a little bit more of maturity within this space where folks are kind of coming from one legal practice management system to another. You have to think about how to migrate that data over, and that's like another very interesting complexity that we continuously invest in and make sure that we have the best sort of seamless experience as possible on that front. There's also, we like to think of our product as being like it's extremely user friendly, but it's still complex. And like jumping into a software like this that has so much configurable optionality, you kind
Hmm.
of got to make sure that in order for folks to like really get that, condense the time to value and they're really getting their like an understanding for how to use the system, that we have like a heavier hand in kind of like walking them through that. And so we explore different, product led motions there and also just customer success type motions where we're actually like spending time, and different packages get you certain amounts. But like I would say from my experience looking at like other industries, we spend a lot more time than I would say typical SMB vertical SaaS companies spend
Yeah.
on like getting you ramped up. And then we really lean into the customer support side too. Like we have, email, chat, phone, like a lot of other of our competitors don't necessarily have all those channels, and our
Right.
turnaround times, like we're managing that very closely because we want to have that next level customer experience. If you think about lawyers and the space, it's extremely relationship based. And
Yeah.
what that means is that it's very referral based. So when we think about like word of mouth and people adopting Clio, like the primary channels are going to be mostly like, look how another lawyer, like you mentioned, for instance, someone in your neighborhood saying like, hey, I need a lawyer. Like not only that, but you have lawyers asking each other like, what legal practice management software are you using? What's so good about it, et cetera. And so it's
Everyone's
really
chatting back and
important.
forth.
Yeah, so it's important that we have really strong customer experiences post sale. It's not just getting you in the door, but it's about making sure that you're realizing the value. Um, and so yeah, and especially as we work our way up market, we're continuously building out more like real business reviews that we have with some of the bigger accounts to make sure that their users are adopting and using the technology in the best way possible. They're all sharing best practices. We're learning a lot throughout that process, but we're sharing it, and it creates that kind of osmosis between our customers, ourselves, and each other.
Are there any, because this is incredibly random, are there any like just kind of crazy off the wall requests that your teams have ever like gotten from a law firm or from a client where they're like, I don't know that I can build this, but obviously don't share too much. I don't want you to give away the farm, but like I'm sure you've gotten some crazy requests in the past where you're like, I don't even know if this is like possible, but yeah, sure, let's see if we can build it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say through some of our like assessments on product builds, like we naturally will flesh out whether this is like something that's so like an ask that's one particular user versus an or account versus it being something that's like widespread throughout our customer base.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's just one account, like these wild ideas don't necessarily get funded. But I will say like it's interesting to hear some of the requests or different challenges. Like an example would be government. Like there's a lot of flavors of government lawyers
Yeah.
and agencies, and we've found good traction. Like some have found ways in which we can work together well, but it's a very challenging, requirements heavy, very different way of working. And so like trying to jump through those hoops can be kind of like you're scratching your head as to like we're talking about, a LPM that costs a couple $100 a month, but like the requirements that you're asking for are like more geared towards, let's say, like an Oracle sized company that's like doing tens of millions of dollars with the government. I mean, tens of millions of dollars with one agency, let alone $1 billion deals with the government.
Right.
So it's funny when you kind of they don't necessarily right size the requirements to the technology. And so that's been an interesting one that I guess most recently kind of exposed to.
I would imagine that you've got some just off the wall things. People come to you and they're like, "This is what I want this to do. Like, I need this document to write itself and then do this. I'd like a cup of coffee on my desk. Like, $10, go right." Like off the wall stuff
100%.
like that is just crazy. We've already talked just very briefly on the AI, you guys coming up with like a one-stop shop, kind of connecting to a bunch of different things. Is there any like crown jewel thing that you guys are looking forward to that's kind of coming down the pipeline in the next maybe like 3 to 5 years within the sector itself? Not necessarily what Clio is working on, but anything that's just like looming on the horizon that you're excited about for the future of the legal field.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I was referring to before, the legal like industry in general is just not an early adopter of technology. And so it's really exciting because you can kind of see the same trends that happen across other industries, like where we are in there in like those same trends being applied to the legal industry with the compounded change of AI. And so like taking like there's not going to be the exact same motion that the industry goes through that others went
Sure,
through.
yeah.
Trying to like map that out and think about it is like really fun. And I think that's where I kind of like I guess bring it back almost to how all the players within the industry are up leveling their use of technology, whether it's the courts, the government, the legal practices themselves, or in-house counsel. Like there's different flavors of lawyers in the legal industry. And as they all come online and we're building out that plumbing, you can just reimagine so much about how the industry works so much better together. And it has that bigger impact. I think like one of the more interesting ones that is still lagging in some ways, but COVID helped accelerate was courtroom technology adoption. And like
Okay.
it's an interesting field where like they're just starting to build out that plumbing on how they can connect directly into all the other technologies and think about like sharing of evidence, sharing of documents, filing your court documents. Like there's so many different ways in which there's like these kind of very myopically pointed solutions, but as we think about those being connected, there's just so much like opportunity to be had, and it not only will help make folks more efficient, but it really will help that like access to justice front that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure that gives you an opportunity to see kind of like the changing arc in what's happening in the legal sector is something that's already happened in, I don't know, manufacturing or something like that, right? And you can say, okay,
Right.
here's where manufacturing maybe had its roadblocks, and here's how we can overcome that now because we already know that the same pattern is happening. So we can kind of get ahead of those changes and everything like that.
And you can build out a strong vision and take people along for that.
I
Like
love
drawing
that.
from those examples, you can be like, it's clearly played out here. Let's bring it here, and it gets people a little bit more motivated.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Well, I know we're coming up on the end of time here. I want to be respectful of that, for you, Mitch. I like I said at the beginning, I love learning about this stuff and kind of hearing your perspective of it because I go back to the Lego analogy, but I always enjoy trying to see, okay, where is your mind at basically, right? Where is your team's mind at and how are you navigating through a lot of things that are changing, especially with something as complex as the legal field. Now, I'll admit, the extent of my knowledge of the legal field is pretty much only in the show Suits that I just recently finished watching. That's about all I got right now. But, kind of hearing your perspective on all these intricacies only around technology and how it's going to help, I hesitate to say breathe new life into it, but it kind of is in a sense, right? It's kind of breathing new life into what everyone can do. So I've enjoyed this conversation. I think it's, super, super interesting. It kind of, final thing that I want to leave with, I do this with all of my guests, but whether it's from your perspective and your role in what you do, or if it's somebody, the legal field in general, I mean, do you have any words of advice for anybody, who's either looking to step into a role like yours and in the same or another industry, or any sort of words of advice for anybody in the legal field that you'd want to pass on, to anybody who happens to be listening?
Yeah, no, happy to. I think what I've learned the most about being successful at like a strategy and operations role, and I'll take your question in that direction.
Yeah,
I think is just being extremely curious and leaning in and always kind of, my motto has always been like, never say no, and like always embrace discomfort. Like all these things that you're going to be jumping into, you can imagine like the ambiguity is so fierce, and you just got to kind of like go step by step, build out a plan and start executing it, and kind of have an impetus for action. So I think being action oriented and curious will get you really far in this area, and you're always going to be able to kind of brush up on your skills and the ways in which you can kind of tackle the work, but you got to make sure that you are excited about it, that it gives and brings some levity to the day to day. I mean, our team is in so much work and we're always driving so many initiatives, and it can get exhausting, but like making sure people are having fun along the way is so important to making sure you have strong relationships and people enjoy working with you. And I can't stress that enough in terms of making sure you build strong relationships through that method.
That's such a perfect way to kind of wrap some things up here. I love that. I love that kind of always being, curious and on top of things. That's just that's awesome. So, Mitch, I really appreciate this conversation. This was exciting. I would definitely love to kind of continue the conversation in the future. Kind of learn maybe 6 months from now what's Clio been up to, or what's Mitch been up to, right? What are you working on, or what are you excited about? What's some updates about what we talked about now, and maybe what we talk about in the future. But for the time being, I think it's a good way to kind of end some things off and get everything wrapped up here. So again, everyone, this is Mitch from Clio, Director of Strategy and Operations over there. Super exciting to have you on here, man. And I really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And like I said, I'm excited to be able to provide some input, and I appreciate you inviting me onto the podcast, Chris.
Absolutely, man. Take it easy. Shout out once again to Mitch for spending some time with us for this fireside chat. I really enjoyed getting to hear how Mitch's team is involved with the ins and outs of everything that flows through Clio. The importance of having a team so tightly knit with other areas within a company is huge for overall company growth. If you have a favorite part that you enjoyed, feel free to leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on this chat with Mitch. Be sure to like the video, consider hitting that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you can be alerted when future chats go live on our channel. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy hunting.